The silence of the forest didn't break with a scream. It broke with a rumble that traveled up through the frozen ground, rattling Adia's bones. The horizon exploded. They came pouring over the ridge like a wave, soldiers in scale armor that clattered like hail on metal. Tall hats with peacock feathers bobbing in rhythm with galloping horses. Long spears with tips that caught the moonlight. They surrounded Adia and the prince in a perfect circle. A wall of steel and distrust. The thunder of hooves stopped. Then came the sharp hiss of 100 swords being drawn at once. Nobody looked at the dead assassins scattered on the ground. Nobody looked at their prince. They all stared at Adia. She wasn't their savior. She was something that crawled out of the ocean. They saw the blood on her face, her skin dark as river mud, the foreign gold stacked around her neck. "Lower your weapons." A captain shouted, voice cracking. He leveled his sword at Adia's throat. "Demon, step away from His Highness." Adia didn't move. She was calculating distances. If he lunged, she'd deflect with the left blade, spin, take the prince to the ground. She had maybe 3 more kills left in her. Maybe. A bowman locked eyes with her, drew his string back. The wood creaked. That iron arrowhead was aimed right at her face. Halt. One word from Isan. Quiet, but with the kind of authority that owns the air. The prince stepped out from behind her. No stumbling, no hesitation. He moved with the eerie grace of someone who knows the ground without seeing it. Put his hand on Adia's shoulder. Pale fingers. Scholar's hands, not a warrior's. But the heat of it burned through her leather. "Your Highness." The captain dropped to his knees in the snow. The whole circle rippled as men fell, heads bowing, foreheads in the slush. "We feared the signal." "The threat's over," Isan said. His hand stayed on Adia's shoulder, claiming her, marking her. "And this isn't a threat." The captain looked up. His eyes darted to the corpses scattered in the snow, limbs severed, throats opened. Then back to Adia. He swallowed hard. "Your Highness, what is that?" "A guest," Isan said. He turned his head slightly, the blindfold facing Adia. "My guest. Treat her like my own shadow. If an arrow flies toward her, I'll assume it's meant for me." The captain hesitated. The archer with the drawn bow didn't lower it. His fingers trembled on the string. Terrified, Adia stared at him. "Go ahead," she thought. "Give me a reason." "Sheathe your weapons," the captain barked, sensing the shift. The tension snapped. The arrow lowered. Swords slid back into scabbards with a sullen clatter. Isan leaned close to Adia. She caught his scent again. Ink, pine, fresh snow. "Can you walk, warrior of the West?" Adia sheathed her blades with a dual click. "I can march until your sun burns out, Prince." He smiled. "Small, fragile. Good. Because the walk to the cage is long. If you thought the assassins were dangerous, the palace politics are about to make that look like child's play." Adia's walking into a den of vipers. Hit subscribe because you don't want to miss what happens next. The procession moved through the snow like a bleeding wound across white fabric. In the center, a wooden palanquin, basically a room carried by 4 men, swayed gently. The prince sat inside. They offered Adia a horse. She refused. Didn't trust their beasts. Didn't trust them. She walked right beside the prince's box, trudging through mud and slush, hand never far from her sword. The country was stunning. And hostile. Cold that felt personal. In Benin, he'd embraced you, moved with you. Here, the air tried to kill you. Bit at her exposed arms. Tried to freeze the sweat on her neck into ice. The palanquin's window slid open. Isan sat wrapped in heavy furs. He turned his face toward the sound of her boots crunching in snow. "You're shivering," he said. "I'm vibrating with readiness," Adia lied. "You lie poorly," he replied softly. "I can hear your teeth. They sound like tiny stones clicking together." Adia clenched her jaw. "This land hates life. It's winter," Isan said. "It kills the weak so the strong see spring." He extended a hand through the window, holding a small metal pot wrapped in cloth. "Take this." "What is it?" "Hot coals. For your hands." Adia looked at the pot, then at the soldiers marching around them. They stared ahead, rigid and disciplined, but she felt their sideways glances, waiting for her to fail. To freeze. To prove she was some savage that belonged in the dirt. She took the pot. The warmth rushed into her palms, painful and sweet. "Thank you," she grunted. "Adia," he said, testing the name again. "It sounds like a drum beat." It means gift in my tongue. A gift, he mused, leaning back into shadows. Yes, I suppose you are. Oh. As twilight deepened, turning the snow purple bruised, their destination appeared. The palace wasn't a building. It was a city of cages. The Guangwaman Gate loomed massive and imposing. Huge timber pillars painted violent red and jade green held up a roof of heavy gray tiles. Everything ordered, strict. In Benin, the Oba's palace was earth and bronze, grown from the ground. This place was a fortress of geometry. Open the gates, the captain shouted. Heavy timber groaned. They entered the courtyard, vast enough to fit 3 armies. Stone floors swept clean of snow. Hundreds of people were waiting. Courtiers in silk robes, so wide they looked like floating bells. Officials with hats signifying ranks Adia didn't understand. Servants with heads bowed, so low their noses touched frozen stone. When they set down the prince's palanquin, the silence was absolute. Adia stood beside the door, armor stained with dried blood, boots caked in mud, breath clouding in the freezing air. She looked like a war god who'd kicked open temple doors. Isan stepped out. An older man approached, thin gray beard, deep crimson robe. He looked at the prince with relief, then his eyes slid to Adia. The relief vanished, replaced by pure horror, almost comical. Your Highness, the old man quavered. The palace has been invaded? I've returned, Counselor Min, Isan said. He gestured vaguely at Adia. And I brought a savior. Counselor Min stepped closer, nose wrinkling. Adia could smell the oils on his skin, stale incense in his clothes. Savior? Min scoffed. It's, a woman? Demon? It's black as charred wood. Is it burnt, Your Highness? Adia's hand twitched toward her blade. Charred wood. Isan stiffened. For the first time, the gentle prince vanished. His jaw set. He tilted his head, blindfold facing the counselor directly. Careful, counselor. You're talking about the warrior who killed 6 nightwalkers while you sat by your warm brazier eating rice cakes. The court gasped. The sound rippled through the crowd like wind through dry grass. The nightwalkers. They knew who those assassins were. She's an elite of the Benin kingdom, Isan announced, voice projecting across the courtyard. She's my personal guest. She'll be housed in the West Pavilion. The West Pavilion? Min sputtered. But that's inside the inner sanctum, near your own quarters. It's against protocol. A foreigner, a woman armed. Protocol, Isan said softly, failed to keep me safe on the road. Protocol is deaf and blind. She isn't. Isan reached out. He didn't know exactly where Adia stood, but he reached into empty air with an open hand. Adia understood. Performance. He was daring them to object. She stepped forward, let his hand find her arm. His grip was firm. Come, Adia, he said. The air's stale here. I want to wash the road off my skin. Adia looked at the counselor, at the sea of pale faces, the silk, the gold, the rigid geometry of this alien world. She was a wolf walked into a kennel of silk-draped dogs. They'd try to poison her, or stab her in her sleep, or manipulate this blind boy into casting her out. Let them try. Let on, my prince, she said, voice deep in her throat. She walked him through the crowd. They parted like water, terrified to touch even her shadow. As they climbed stairs to the inner sanctum, Adia looked back once. Counselor Min was watching. His eyes weren't filled with fear anymore. They were calculating. The sword fight's over, but now comes the real danger. In the next scene, the armor comes off and the walls come down. Adia's about to see a side of the prince no one's allowed to see. Calm and protect if you're standing with Adia. Moving from the freezing courtyard to the inner sanctum was like stepping from a grave into a womb. Adia followed the prince through sliding doors of paper and wood. The air here was thick, perfumed with something sweet and smoky, sandalwood and dried orange peel. The floor changed from stone to wood, polished so smooth it reflected flickering lantern light like dark water. They reached the West Pavilion, a private wing, isolated from the court's noise. Isan stopped in the room's center, breathed in deeply, chest rising and falling beneath blue silk. He looked exhausted. That regal posture he'd held before the army and counselors crumbled, just a fraction. Leave us, he said. The head servant, a gray-haired woman, hesitated. Your Highness, surely. The guest requires her own quarters? To leave you alone with. With a foreign mercenary. I said, leave us, Isan repeated. His voice didn't rise, but the room seemed to get colder. And prepare the bath. The servant bowed hastily and retreated. Paper doors slid shut. Suddenly, the silence was deafening. Adia stood by the door, hand resting on her sword pommel. She watched him. He stood in the center, surrounded by shadows. He looked smaller now. Without the snow and assassins to distract her, she realized how young he was. And how alone. You dismissed your guards, Adia said, voice rumbling in the quiet. I have no guards, Isan replied, untying his black mesh hat. I have spies who wear the king's uniform. If I'd closed my eyes tonight, one of them would have finished what the assassin started. He turned to face her, the white blindfold stark against pale skin. But you, Adia, you belong to no faction. You're the only steel in this palace that isn't magnetized to a plot. I'm a stranger, Adia countered. I could slit your throat and take your gold. Isan smiled. Genuine, tired. You buried your dead in frozen sand rather than run for shelter. A woman who grieves with such honor doesn't murder for coin. He began undoing the ties of his outer robe. Blue silk fell to the floor, whispering as it hit wood. Adia stiffened. In Benin, the body wasn't shameful, but it was private. What are you doing? I'm freezing, Adia, he said simply. The cold settled in my bones. I have to draw it out, or I'll be dead of fever by morning. Paper doors at the far end slid open. Steam billowed out, white and thick. Servants had prepared the bath, a large square tub of cypress wood filled with steaming water. Isan walked toward the steam. Guard the door, Adia. Let no one enter. Not even if they claim to have a message from the king. Adia took her post, stood with her back to the bath, facing the sliding doors to the corridor, crossed her arms, feeling cold metal armor against her skin. Behind her, she heard the rustle of inner layers falling, soft sound of bare feet on wood. She shouldn't look. Wasn't her place. She was a general, not a voyeur. But warrior instinct is to survey the room, to know the protectee's position. She turned her head, just slightly. Through the veil of rising steam, she saw him. He stood by the water's edge, pale as a ghost. His body was lean, defined not by bulky soldier muscle, but by the wiry tension of a survivor. But it was his back that made Adia's breath catch. It was a map of pain. Long silvery lines crisscrossed his shoulder blades. Burn marks, old and faded, marred his lower back. These weren't battle scars. These were torture scars. Punishment scars. You're staring. Isan's voice cut through the steam. He hadn't turned around. Hadn't seen her look. But he knew. Adia didn't look away. You're back, she said, voice low. Who did that to you? Isan stepped into the water, hissed as heat bit into frozen skin, then sank down until water lapped at his chest. A prince must learn resilience, he said. Some lessons are taught with books. Others, with heated iron and whips. A father doesn't teach his son with a whip, Adia growled. Anger flared in her chest, hot and sudden. That's not teaching. That's breaking. I'm not broken, Isan said. He lifted a hand, watching water drip from his fingers though he couldn't see it. I'm merely tempered, like your sword. My sword is made of iron, Adia said, turning fully to face him now. You're made of flesh and blood. It's not the same, isn't it? Isan turned his head toward her sound. Come closer, Adia. Adia hesitated. Every instinct said stay back. Keep professional distance. But the pull was magnetic. She walked toward the tub, heavy boots thudding softly on wood. Stopped a few paces away, looming over him like a dark statue. Isan reached up and touched the knot of white blindfold behind his head. The steam, he murmured, makes the cloth heavy. He pulled the knot. White silk fell away. Adia braced herself, expected to see ruin. Empty sockets or scars that destroyed his face. She saw neither. His eyes were open, beautiful, almond-shaped, framed by long dark lashes. But the irises were clouded, covered in milky film that looked like morning mist over a river. Eyes that looked at everything and saw nothing. He blinked, moisture from steam gathering on his lashes. Without the blindfold, he looked younger, and terrifyingly vulnerable. Can you see anything? Adia asked, voice softening involuntarily. I see light, he whispered. And shadow. I see that you're a tall darkness standing in the mist. But I can't see your face. He reached out a wet hand. Didn't ask permission. Just reached out, palm up, suspended in the air between them. Adia. An invitation. And a test. Adia looked at his hand. It was shaking slightly. She reached out. Took his hand. Her hand was twice the size of his. Her skin rough, dry, almost black against his wet pale palm. The contrast was stark. Beautiful. You're warm, he said, closing his fingers around hers. You're a furnace. And you're still cold, Adia said. Then stay, he whispered. Stay until the cold's gone. For a moment, the world narrowed to the point where their skin touched. Steam curled around them, isolating them from the palace, from assassins, from politics waiting outside. There was only the heat of water and the heat of the woman. Adia felt something strange in her chest. Not battle adrenaline. Something heavier. Dangerous. She was the guard. He was the prince. This was a line she couldn't cross. She gently pulled her hand away. I'll stay, she said, stepping back into shadows, hand returning to sword hilt. But I'll stay as your shield. Nothing more. Isam lowered his hand into the water. A shadow of disappointment crossed his face, gone in an instant. A shield, he murmured, closing his eyes. Yes, that's what I need. He sank deeper into the water. Now we sleep. There's only one bed in this pavilion that's safe, and I'm sleeping in it. You can sleep on the floor, between me and the door. The line between duty and desire is getting blurry. Drop a like if you're feeling this tension between them. Adia sat at the foot of his bed, crossed her legs, placing her twin swords across her lap, leaned her back against the bed frame. She could feel the warmth of his feet through the blanket against her spine. She closed one eye. I'll close one, she whispered to the darkness. The other belongs to you. Night settled over the palace. But in the West Pavilion, two hearts beat in the silence. One rhythmic and slow, like a calm ocean. The other wild and heavy, like a war drum. Adia's watch has begun, but the threats are getting closer. In the next episode, morning brings a new enemy. A coup is brewing, and things are about to get deadly. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the moment they have to run for their lives. Comment Onyx if you're protecting the prince.